Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. As you can tell, I'm out of the hotel and in my basement into a room we're converting into like a studio office. So we're getting there, but we have some work to do. Thanks so much for being here. Of course, there was no court today, and there's no court tomorrow. There was no court yesterday, so I took an evening flight home yesterday, and it's been great to be with the family and get caught up on so many other things. But we still wanted to do Courtroom Insider for you. And tonight we have a pretty good program for you. The one and only Nancy Grace is here. We will have her interview a bit later. She has some strong thoughts and feelings about Lori Vallow Daybell and the charges and whether she believes the Idaho cases will be brought in to Charles Vallow's case, along with her thoughts on the men, so many men being on the jury versus the three women who are on that jury. Also, Kirk Nurmi is here. He is most well known for defending Jodi Arias in the same exact courthouse where Lori Vallow has been and will be for the next few weeks. In fact, just across the hall. Lori Vallow's in one courtroom. Jodi Arias was just across the hall, and Kirk knows exactly what it's like to represent a high-profile client. We'll talk about the case here and some of the challenges that the prosecution and the judge might have dealing with a pro se defendant, Lori Vallow, someone who represents herself, along with things that we can expect to see in the trial. So we're also going to get to your questions. Please let me know if you have any in the comments, because we're going to answer them. Peggy is on standby going through those. Also, let us know where you're watching from, because we're keeping a list of all of the unique cities and countries and states where you are, and it's just fascinating to see so many people watching Courtroom Insider from all over the world. So if you're just tuning in for the first time, Lori Vallow Daybell is on trial in the state of Arizona for conspiracy to commit the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. This happened back in July of 2019, July 11th of 2019. She is now going on trial. She is representing herself, and a jury has been picked, has been sworn in, has been read instructions, and on Monday morning at 10:30 Arizona time, Lori Vallow will give her opening statement. The prosecution, Trina Kay, will also give her opening statement, and then the case will proceed. So many of you have been asking, how do I watch this with the time zones and whatever? Well, I've created this graphic that lays it all out. The trial starts at 10:30 Arizona time. That's 11:30 Mountain Time. Arizona, because it's daylight savings, does not celebrate or, I guess, honor, commemorate, whatever you want to call it. They don't do daylight savings. So really the trial for Mountain Standard Time purposes starts at 11:30. The judge has instituted a 30-minute delay on all video being released. One of you wrote me today very upset saying, why are you putting a delay on? What's the purpose? It's not us who is determining it. It's the judge. So you can start watching at the following times live. 11 a.m. if you're in the Pacific time zone or Arizona, noon if you're in Mountain, 1 if you're in Central, 2 if you're in Eastern. That's the time to book. Go to East Idaho News YouTube. Be sure you subscribe and hit the bell. You'll get an alert when we go live. We're actually going to start our live early so that you can be ready to go and watch it. And then, even though the trial will end at 4:30 Pacific or Arizona time, it really will go until 5 o'clock, because there'll be the 30-minute delay if you're watching. If you don't have time to watch all day, don't worry. Once court's over, it'll be archived on our YouTube. You can go watch it whenever. Plus, we'll do Courtroom Insider every night, and I will be providing live written updates via Twitter, X, and on eastidahonews.com every day, so you can go through and read it on your lunch break or whatever. Hope that clears it up. Basically, subscribe to the East Idaho News channel and you won't miss a thing, and it's free. You don't have to pay anything. We're going to give it to you. So I'll be headed back to Arizona this weekend in time for the trial as it begins on Monday. All right, without any further ado, why don't we jump straight to my interview with Kirk Nurmi. This is a guy who, I actually asked about his background, and he shares his thoughts about Lori Vallow Daybell. So here is my interview with Kirk. Kirk, thank you so much for being here today. For those people that might not be familiar with your background, you've definitely represented a very high-profile case, especially in Maricopa County. Tell people a little bit about your history, your background.
Sure. Well, most people know me as the attorney, the lead counsel for Jodi Arias. But before that, I worked in the death penalty unit at the Public Defender's Office in Maricopa County for about 6 years, I guess. And then prior to that, I was a deputy public defender for several years, handling all kinds of serious cases. And that's ultimately how I became Jodi Arias's lead counsel, being assigned as a public defender and being uh, forced to keep it after leaving the public defender's office, going into private practice. So that is the background. I'm very familiar with Maricopa County and a lot of the parties involved here.
So you were assigned to Jodi Arias's case, and in the beginning, I would imagine it wasn't as high profile as it soon came to be once the trial started. Or was it? Was it always huge from the beginning?
No, it really wasn't in one sense, because you think about, we compare it, and we're talking about Miss Vallow's case today. Um, she comes into it with a great deal of publicity, right? There's already a prior trial. There's publicity on that. That was live streamed, the most part anyway. Um, so she's very well known. There's been a lot of specials, what have you. When Jodi Arias went to trial in Maricopa County, at least the first time before we did the retrial sentencing phase, Miss Arias had done one special, 148-hour special, and a couple other interviews, and those had been done years prior. So there's kind of a different ambiance to it, if you will, because Miss Vallow comes into this so high profile to begin with.
So, Kurt, you did have the high profile case of Jodi Arias. Lori Vallow Daybell is, of course, high profile there in Maricopa County. What type of things do you think the defense is doing now to prepare as opening statements begin Monday and the trial starts?
Well, that would be an easy question to answer if she was represented by a counsel, right? Now that Miss Vallow has decided to represent herself, it's hard to say, because you have to really, question what is her motivation for representing herself. And we can talk about some of those possible motivations if you want, Nate.
Yeah, what would there be? I mean, other than maybe she thinks she knows more than her attorneys, or why go pro se when you have experts who can help you?
Right. And I should preface every answer I'm going to give today, because we talk about Ms. Vallow and her mental faculties. She's obviously not a free thinking individual. So in some sense, we're imposing logic upon an illogical mind. But one of the things I would say, Nate, is that one of the biggest reasons why a defendant will say, hey, I want to represent myself, is because they don't believe their public defender is going to work for them. They're not real attorneys. She might have heard things of this in the jail, so therefore she wants to represent herself. Another common reason that might be more applicable to Ms. Vallow, because we haven't heard her voice anything like that, might be this idea that the attorneys don't believe in their innocence. Therefore, they feel like their passion for their case, their belief in their innocence, will be more impactful on a jury than an attorney who is going through the motions, if you will. The third thing that I think can be interesting, that we haven't heard out of Ms. Vallow, but it's certainly part of her mental illness or ideations, is her religious beliefs. And sometimes a defendant will say, hey, I want an attorney that aligns with my religious beliefs, because I don't trust anybody who doesn't. So, that could play into it. I mean, who knows? Maybe she believes that, and I don't mean to sound flip here, but who knows? Maybe she believes her attorney is a dark spirit, or is low on her scoreboard or something of that nature, and she doesn't want that person leading her case. So there's a lot of things that could come into play there, but I think those are really probably the primary reasons.
What do you do as the attorney there, who's her advisory counsel, when you know that what the defendant is doing might not be the best course of action? Do you just have to kind of support it and let it play out?
Yeah, ultimately you do. I mean, because you don't want the biggest sin, if you will. Well, there's no specific guidelines of what advisory counsel does. There's no like set of rules. But the biggest thing you don't want to do as advisory counsel is interfere with your client's right to represent themselves. So to be saying, don't do this, don't do that, what have you, or precluding them from trying to, argue against it is not a good thing. So a lot of attorneys will take the approach that they might try to steer the client or help them with certain motions or what have you. But I always think the cleanest approach, because you don't want to interfere with her right to counsel, is just, if they call, you're in the office, you pick up the phone, you say your piece, and that's it. So that's probably what we're seeing out of this attorney here, because we're seeing Miss Vallow, Miss Daybell, plow ahead, especially when we talk about this issues with continuances and her witnesses and everything that's being precluded, plow ahead against all reason to the contrary, which her attorney would probably be advising her of, if she's even asking. I mean, she doesn't even need to ask, her counsel. She may just be doing all of this on her own, so to speak.
How much more difficult or easier does it make for the prosecution and the judge when you have a pro se defendant in such a high profile case?
Well, ultimately, it makes the conviction easier. I don't know that the high profile nature of it really alters that. It may, in the sense that it makes getting the conviction easier, but the road there may be more difficult by having a pro se defendant and or the high profile nature of it. Because we saw, and we know that juries, what things can kind of go one or two ways with a pro per defendant. One, it can take a lot longer because they're objecting, they're asking irrelevant questions, they're doing things that the jury, they need to be excused, the jury needs to be excused because they're going off in a silly direction, or they don't really say a lot. And maybe that's, you might have watched bulk of jury selection. I'm guessing Lori didn't say a lot. I'm guessing that the judge directed the voir dire enough to ensure her rights to a fair trial. The county attorney as well, Miss Kay, she's very experienced as a county attorney. So, all those things, if Miss Vallow, and if she doesn't have a defense to present, I mean, we hear her now saying, I can't call these witnesses, what have you. She's not going to have much of a case on her side, and cross-examination might be very minimal as well.
Now, one thing that's different in Maricopa County, or maybe the state of Arizona, you tell me, versus Idaho, is the jurors can ask questions of the witnesses.
Yes, that is a statewide issue. So if Ms. Vallow decides to take the stand, and I believe she's indicated that she is interested in taking the stand and having her advisory council read the questions that she has prepared verbatim, she will subject herself to the questions of the jury. Now, if they're plentiful, that could certainly take a long time. When we talk about that road to get to a conviction, that could certainly take a long time.
And so how does that work, Kirk? Do they, is it for every witness or just the defendant?
Every witness.
So at the end of this, let's say it's a state witness, the state questions, defense cross-examines, state, do they do re-examination and then
redirect? Yes.
Redirect, and then the jurors pass in note cards or something like that?
Yeah, the judge will typically give them a pad of paper or whatever they have, and they say, does anyone have any questions for this witness? If there is a question, that question will be passed up to the judge, and that judge takes a look at the question to see if it's legally permissible. Like, it can't call for hearsay, it can't be argumentative, something of that nature, right? And both parties will be typically, now how it might be done a little bit differently with Ms. Vallow being pro per, but typically the attorneys go to the bench and they discuss the legal viability of the question. If it's Ms. Vallow, she's on the witness stand, that won't be as much of an issue, but logistically, but then they go over the legal viability of the question. If they're considered legally viable, those questions are asked, and then each party has the opportunity to follow up on the answer. So if jurors ask a particular question, the witness gives the answer, both parties have a chance to follow up on that specific answer with their own questioning.
Let's say that there is a guilty verdict that comes down, Kirk. How soon will sentencing happen?
Well, given that we have two, typically, Nate, the parameters would be about 30 days. But given that we have two trials, it's possible and quite probable that the sentencing will be delayed until both trials are done. Because obviously, as we know, Ms. Vallow is not going anywhere. There's no real urgency to get her sentencing done. So I think it would probably happen after the incident related to Mr. Boudreau is litigated.
And is that something that the judge imposes rather than the jury?
The sentencing,
Sentencing, right?
yes.
Yeah.
The jury doesn't give recommendations or anything of that nature. There are statutory guidelines. The judge will have a range of sentencing options. I believe it's 25 to life. Is that correct? Yeah. And then the judge can decide whether that is consecutive or concurrent, and to whatever sentence she receives in the attempted murder case.
Well, is there anything that you're kind of keeping an eye out for as this trial begins next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think opening statements are going to be huge because I think we all don't really have a sense, because it's been so chaotic, where Miss Vallow is going with her defense, right? I mean, there's some pretty clear paths, and you asked me earlier, how long will this case take? Is it more complicated? What have you? This case, from a defense perspective, if I were her attorney, it would be pretty quick, because what I would be saying is they made the right conclusion the first time, meaning that Mr. Cox acted in self-defense, and they're trying to rewrite history. And that doesn't take a lot of cross-examination. It doesn't take a lot of putting forward evidence. I mean, I probably wouldn't even consider putting forward evidence. I would just try to rely on the history of those police officers. What Ms. Vallow will do, we'll start to get a sense of that in opening statement, to see where it goes, where, what's she going to put forward. And that will give us a key of how long this is going to take. Because I think, to emphasize what I said earlier, Ms. Vallow is going to wind up convicted. It's just the process of getting there. How tedious is that going to be for everyone involved? But, the judge has shown an excellent patient disposition from everything I've seen. And as I said earlier, Miss Kay is very experienced, and, she doesn't have to do anything outrageous, what have you, to gain a conviction. She's going to have to differentiate the outcome or the conclusion that she wants the jury to reach now than from the conclusion that the Chandler Police and or the Maricopa County Attorney's Office reached when they did not charge Miss Vallow in any of this, or Mr. Cox in any of this.
Yeah, before he died, right?
Yeah, because that's really the ground in which you're fighting this case, because you're saying, and it's kind of funny because Miss Vallow, she wants the county attorney's office so bad. If she looked at their prior engagement and their prior disinclination to try the case or to bring the case against Mr. Cox, there could be witnesses within the county attorney's office that could speak to that she's not seeking out.
Right, that she could call as her own witnesses to try to go after the prosecution.
Potentially so. I mean, the intricacies of the case and getting a prosecutor removed is very difficult, but that would certainly be an avenue that I would, and I'm guessing that her advisory council and or her prior counsel did just that, and maybe came to the conclusion that they couldn't do that. So I don't want what I'm saying to be seen as a criticism of them, because that's a very complicated issue, but certainly one I think counsel would be exploring.
Yeah. All right, Kirk, anything that you want to add?
No, I hope, I guess, and one of the things that I think happens, Nate, is that you asked me, about the high profile nature and everything else. I just want to reiterate, when I think about these high profile cases, I mean, we're in the mix of Karen Reed right now, and Miss Vallow, Miss Daybell. I hope people don't lose sight of the victims in this case, because a lot of times when that happens, when we talk about the Karen Reed case and everything that's going on, I'll be talking to Vinnie Politan about that tonight. John O'Keefe's name never comes up, right? And in this case, I think Tylee and Ryan certainly got their due in the other case, and obviously they're not the victims in this case. But I think we hear, so she's called the doomsday mom, what have you. We hear so little about Charles, and I hope his memory and his legacy sight isn't lost on that when we talk about all the craziness that might ensue over the next few weeks before Miss Vallow is convicted.
Very good.
So that's the only thing I would say in that regard. And I appreciate people like you who make sure that doesn't happen.
All right. Well, my thanks to Kirk Nurmi for that interview. And he won't be the only attorney paying attention to this, as many across the country will be watching this trial as it begins. So from one attorney to the other, Nancy Grace, he's more the defense attorney. Nancy's more the prosecutor. I guess we could have had him on to debate. We're not going to do that tonight, but I did speak with Nancy a little bit earlier about this case to hear her thoughts, as she's been following it, from the beginning and picking up on the updates and researching it. And here is my conversation with Nancy Grace. So Nancy, Lori Vallow Daybell is representing herself. What do you think about that?
Nate Eaton, thank you for inviting me. Many people would scoff at the idea of someone representing themselves. I've heard cult mom Lori Vallow in court making some very coherent and on-point arguments before the judge. I believe she's going to be found guilty, whether she represents herself or whether she has the dream team, whether she brings Johnny Cochran and F. Lee Bailey back from the dead and represent her. She's going to be found guilty. The evidence is overwhelming. I'm curious as to whether her similar transaction in the murders of her child, JJ, her other child, Tylee, are coming into evidence.
Yeah, that'll be the big question, because this trial, of course, is focused on Charles Vallow's death, but there were those crimes in Idaho that she's already been convicted of. A lot of people are curious, Nancy, that the jury consists of 13 men and 3 women. They think Lori's going to try to woo over the men. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I understand, Nate, that the jury is packed with men. And that there will be an attempt for cult mom Lori Vallow to woo them. Now, that wouldn't be the first time that that's happened. Do I have to say O.J. Simpson? He got the whole jury on his side. It's happened before. Do I think it will happen now? No, because many of these men have children, okay? And there's no way in HELL that they don't know what happened to JJ and Tylee. Also, just the nature of the evidence, the degree of planning, the way that she was able to enlist other people, and that's a really good point. Typically, men, including, her own brother, to do her bidding, it's very disturbing. Do I think they'll see through her? Yes, I do. I mean, you're really not giving the male jurors a whole lot of credit, are you, Nate Eaton? That they're going to be lured by cult mom Lori Vallow? I'm not.
You're right. I think that they will see through it. There are a lot of people online are saying she's able to suck these men into her orbit. And of course, now that she's pro se representing herself, are there obstacles because she is her own attorney that the prosecutor has to pay attention to versus if she had, defense counsel with her?
Oh, Nate, you're so right about that. There are a lot of landmines that the prosecutor can step on, because the prosecutor has to protect the record, the appellate record, not only for the state, but for the defense. How can I explain this? With every trial, when there's a conviction, everybody appeals. Everyone, it's universal. This case, when there's a conviction, which I think there will be an appeal. There will be no one to perfect the record for the defense. In other words, to guard the record, to make sure that she got protected under the Constitution. The only one to do that without an attorney representing cult mom Lori Vallow is the state's prosecutor and, of course, the judge. So the state's got to be really careful because the state's not going to encounter objections they would typically have by the defense. The state has to present their own evidence in their head, hear the objections the other side would lodge, and then cover. So on appeal, an appellate court in their wisdom won't say, oh, this was so unfair. Another thing the judge better do is to ask over and over and over on the record with cult mom Lori Vallow under oath and swearing to her right mind whether she wants to proceed representing herself. Okay? You got to cover that over and over and over. The Constitution does not require you to have a defense attorney. You have the right to have one. You have the right to have one even if you cannot afford one. The state will provide free of charge a lawyer for you, and most likely a lawyer that is experienced in that type of case, such as a murder case, right? In this case, I would be very, very tempted to bring in the similar transactions of her prior murder convictions, but you really have to create a record supporting the introduction of those similar transactions to the 10th degree, so there won't be an appellate problem. And also, Nate, I find this murder trial interwoven with the murders of Tylee and JJ. So in that vein, with that reasoning, it will be more likely that similar transaction, the prior murders, will come in and will stand up on appeal. But I still can't believe you, Nate Eaton, suggesting that cult mom is just so sexy that the jurors are going to vote not guilty. What? Who killed Nate Eaton and is wearing his skin?
Well, I have to tell
She
you,
ain't that hot, okay?
I asked that, Nancy, too, because this is a case. Do you know that Lori Vallow Daybell's trial is being held on the 5th floor of the South Tower of the Maricopa County Court building, directly across from where Jodi Arias's trial was held? We see the courtroom every day where she was in court. You were there almost every day, weren't you? I mean, you had a seat in that courtroom. Didn't she try to turn on the sex appeal?
Yes, Nate. What is with you and female sex appeal? Okay, yes, Jodi Arias was tried right there in that courthouse. Yes, she tried to use her sex appeal, as you put it, on the jurors, just as she did on Travis Alexander and all his friends. It didn't work. She was convicted. Maybe it had something to do, Nate, with the evidence. Thought about that?
Right. Didn't she flip you off?
Okay, I don't know how Jodi Arias shooting a bird at me in the courtroom, what that has to do with cult mom Lori Vallow, but yes, she shot a bird at me. And I'm sure it wasn't the first, nor will it be the last time. I don't care. Don't care. She did it, and so did cult mom Lori Vallow. And what do you think, that she's going to wear a push-up bra and suddenly the jurors are going to go, yeah, not guilty? Doesn't work like that, Eaton.
One thing she will be wearing is a shock belt in case she tries to take off. It's a taser type of thing that will shock her. So we know she's wearing that under her clothes. She fought not to have that. Anyway, Nancy, thank you so much. Anything you want to add?
Yes, Nate Eaton, you bring up that cult mom Lori Vallow is wearing a shock belt so she can be tased if she tries to run. JJ and Tylee never had the opportunity to run. Tylee was rendered down like an animal in a slaughterhouse to nothing but a bucket of fat and tissue. JJ was basically hermetically sealed in the PJs he was wearing the night that cult mom Lori Vallow allowed him to be taken out of her home to be murdered. They were buried in a pet cemetery with animals. Now a jury has been seated in yet another murder trial in a different jurisdiction regarding Charles Vallow. Will it never end? Listen, We need this conviction. Why do we need this conviction? In the unlikely event that her other case is overturned, she needs to stay behind bars. What is this case? It's insurance. Insurance that cult mom Lori Vallow will never walk free to hurt another person. That's what I'm screaming.
And there you have it. Thank you very much, Nancy and Kirk Nurmi, for chatting with me today. Should be a fascinating next few weeks as this trial begins. Okay, let's go for your questions. First of all, we have some shout outs, and I am excited to have these. Oh man, we have a lot of shout outs, which is great. Let me just find them in here. Here we go. Sorry about that. We have Patricia Ward. Hi, Patricia. Thanks for watching. Jess Gibbsob, Connie Powell, David Anglin, Burley Sullivan, Ewan Vanette, Marty Wilson, Vicky Stapleton, Natalie Cassidy, Nicole Radbone, Charlotte Jurgens. Thank you all. We also have one from J.A. Hi, Nate. My sister-in-law. I've been following you from the beginning. My sister-in-law lives in Idaho Falls. Her birthday is this Saturday on April 5th. Happy birthday. She's in the hospital in isolation battling pneumonia and cancer. Her name's Corrine Adams. Shoot, I'm sorry, Corrine. Will you please give her a happy birthday? Absolutely. Happy birthday, Corrine. You are probably an Aries too. Aries? Is that how you say it? Aries. I've been talking Jody Aries. I'm an Aries too. My birthday is coming up on April 14th. So I hope you feel better soon and that you're out of the hospital. And thank you so much for watching. We have people watching in Louisiana, Norway, Panama, Maine, Shelley, Idaho, Lethbridge, Canada, Carmarth, Ayrshire, Wales. I hope I said that right. Arkansas, Lady Lake, Florida, Zimbabwe. Wow. Buell, Idaho, New Zealand, Barina, New South Wales, Australia, Moscow, Russia. Wow. That's amazing. Scotland, Ireland, UK, and England. Thank you all very much for watching and for following and subscribing and just being the best audience there is out there. We have some questions. Vicky, has it ever been discovered where Lori was in March of 2019 when she was missing? She was in Hawaii, and for, I believe, 72 days. She went with, she may have gone by herself, but then I think Melanie Pulowski joined her, and then Sabrina, a couple of her friends, Melanie Gibb, I think, went out there too. So she was in Hawaii. Trish, I heard Lori say she had a $2 million policy on herself. Did we know this? I also caught her saying that. It didn't stick out to me. Maybe we knew this or maybe we didn't, but I believe we did know that. I believe that that came out in an earlier trial or someone had told me that, but yeah, she did have a large policy on herself. What is the case involving Brandon Boudreaux about? Suzanne says. Well, Brandon Boudreaux was married to Lori's niece, Melanie. And they were going through a divorce, and Brandon had moved out, and Brandon was driving home from the gym when he was shot at, and his window was shattered, and somebody shot at him from a Jeep. And now we know it was Alex Cox in the Jeep Tylee had been using that had been in Rexburg, but at this time Tylee had died, been killed. And so most likely it appears Alex took the Jeep from Idaho, drove it down to Arizona to shoot Brandon. He missed. He then drove back to Idaho. Brandon called the police. And so Lori is charged in conspiracy to commit his murder. And so they're alleging that that Lori knew about what was happening. They figured that Brandon had a large life insurance policy or access to money, and presumably. And so that's what that case is about. And that one will happen when this one's over. Cece, what do we know about Trina Kay? She seems so calm. Does she have a team that helps her? I've seen her sitting alone during pretrial. She has so far she's got herself and then a paralegal who sits next to her, at least during jury selection. And that's it that we've seen. She's high up in the prosecutor's office for the county. She worked homicide. She was assigned this case because she was over homicides when it happened. I believe she's been promoted up since then, but she's remained on this case. And I mean, they have the prosecuting office in Maricopa County is so huge. So just amazingly big compared to what we've seen here in Idaho. So yeah, she might have help back at the office, but it sounds like she's going to be doing this on her own. Lori Vallow Daybell, this is from Cindy, stated she would be able to get in touch with everyone on her witness list if she was able to call them, yet Adam Cox is on her list. Knowing how he feels about her, knowing he has no wish to keep her out of jail, I'm curious. What are your thoughts? Well, Adam is on the prosecutor's list, and he's cooperating with them and has been likely served a subpoena. So he's going to be testifying anyway. So anything that Lori would want to ask, she could probably get it in during cross-examination. And she wouldn't need to call him as her witness. So I don't think just because you don't want to testify, that gives you an out. I think that if you have to kind of do it. So, yeah, that's where that stands. So I think we will hear from Adam during this trial. He was the one that was texting Charles. We went through that the other day. And he will likely take the stand for the prosecution. And then Lori could probably cross-examine him. Tony asks, when the actual trial begins, will we continue to see Lori's backside or will the cameras be pointed at her face? Sadly, you will not see her face. The judge has ordered that there's one camera. It's at the very back of the courtroom in a media room. So the camera is shooting through glass. So no one can see the camera and the lights are off in the room. You will be able to see Lori if she gets up to the podium. Well, actually, no, you'll still see the back of her. And she addresses the witness, but you will see the witness. You will have a front shot of the witness and the judge. We wish that there was a camera in the front of the courtroom so you could see all sides, or that there was multiple cameras, but the judge didn't go for that. And we're just glad we have a camera in there. Cindy, another Cindy, who's paying for Lori's street clothes? Well, from what I understand, it's the clothes that she had in Idaho, and also somebody out there, somebody probably watching, has sent her some clothes to wear during the trial. How precise is the location data on cell phones? Daniel asks. That is a good question. I know that it was pretty precise when they went through all the evidence in Idaho dealing with the day that Charles Vallow was shot, the fact that Lori was at Burger King and Walgreens and all over the place, and they knew the time stamps, and that I believe Charles's geolocation was on so that you could track it. So pretty precise from all indications. We'll see. Is Courtroom Insider available in jail? Well, I don't know. If you're watching and you're in jail, please email me or put a comment or call me collect and we'll see. I don't think Lori has access to the internet, but it is possible that if her attorneys watch, they could go in the next day and show it to her. As far as Lori's prior conviction, can they be used in order to establish a pattern of behavior even though they will be limited? That was the discussion the other day about how much can be brought in, especially if Lori takes the stand. Will the jury be informed about her prior convictions? And I don't know if they decided on that, but we'll see. We'll see everything that comes out. I don't think they'll go heavy and deep, but they might. Rosie asks if I've interviewed Brandon Boudreau. I have not. I've spoken with Brandon many, many times over the years. I think he did one media interview at the very beginning, and that was it. He's remained out of the spotlight, but we talk, and hopefully one day I'll get a chance to sit down with him, and you guys can watch the conversation. Lindsay, do judges know about the cases at all prior to court, or do they find out right along with the jury? Does the judge know the evidence from the other cases before this one? I think that's up to the judge. I think the judge freely has a staff who can go out and research, can look stuff up, can learn how high profile is. A lot of times they walk into these cases blind. They don't know what's going to be happening, but they do have access to all the evidence. And they do know what's going to be admitted as exhibits, and they do know what, the prosecution, the defense has to say, we plan to admit this, so they're able to see it. So it's not like anyone's completely shocked when they take the witness stand and, oh my goodness, what's on the screen? Autopsy photos, what? They have to know whether he had an in-depth knowledge about everything in Idaho. I'm unsure. Maybe he's a little curious and he went online to look it up. but I don't know. Nancy, at first Lori got feisty, then got really demure. Do you really think she will act up for the men jury? I have no idea. Monday will be quite telling. We'll see. You're right. She was quite feisty and then very calm. Taisha, I know you said they changed the rules for the Jodi Arias trial as far as the public coming to court, but I'm still not sure if the public can attend. Oh no, you can attend. You can attend. The public can attend. The first row in the courthouse is in the courtroom is reserved for victims, witnesses, families, so you can't sit there, and the back row is reserved for media. And I believe there's 15 seats on each of those. So then there's 3 rows of 15, so around 45 to 50 seats per day. Yeah, you're welcome to come, and if you can get in, you can get in. If you can't, there's waiting areas outside that you can wait, and if someone leaves, you can get their seat, but yeah, it's open. You may have mentioned this, but why is Lori representing herself in court? Did she throw the legal team off her case? Well, this is from Joyce. She had a legal team in the beginning, and they resigned or stepped down or said there was a conflict of interest, and they all left. She was assigned a new team, and Lori said, I want to go pro se. I want to represent myself. The judge said, are you sure? Different hearings were held, and ultimately she wants to be her, her own attorney. Jill Main, when will you get an interview with Lori? Well, that's up to her. I've asked and we've talked, and I'm ready when she is. Probably won't be during the trial, maybe after. Catherine says, can the jury know why Tylee, who is there in the police station interviewing, is not in court? I imagine they will say through a witness or something that Tylee is no longer alive. Are they allowed to bring in information from the Idaho cases to court in Arizona? That will be limited, I would imagine. They've talked a little bit about that. Much like they brought in some Arizona into the Idaho cases, I believe it will be the same the other way too. Lori, do you think they will ever find out where Tylee was killed? I wish. I don't think we'll ever know. Maybe one day Chad or Lori might say something, but I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know for sure. Jesse, if Lori's convicted and found guilty in Arizona, where will she complete her life sentences? Would it be in Arizona or back in Idaho? Curious if there'd be a battle about where she will serve her time. Well, it's already been decided, and Lori will go back to Idaho. She is an Idaho inmate, regardless of the verdict here, of the sentencing here. She could be found guilty, not guilty. When this one's done and Brandon's case is done, Lori will be back in prison in Pocatello and will spend the rest of her life there. No chance of parole. She will die in prison. Jody, did you follow the Dior Coons case? Yes, I have been for 10 years now. That's the little boy who disappeared camping with his parents and relative and grandpa and friend 10 years ago this summer. I cannot believe it's been 10 years. And someone else asked if I've interviewed the parents. I have. It's been some time. I hope to interview them again this year and others because it is the 10-year anniversary of that disappearance. And just when this trial is all over, hope to do something on that. Okay, I think those are it for the questions. Thank you all very much for watching. Here's where you can find me on social media: Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. And for those on Meet and the Eatons, hi to you as well. We'll be back tomorrow, a special edition, a full hour Q&A with Special Prosecutor Rachel Smith. I asked you all to send in questions, and boy, did you ever. I've got pages and pages of them right here. We're going to go through them all, everything from this case to other murders, to the challenges they faced in Idaho, to the challenges they might face in Arizona. It'll be a really compelling hour. I hope that you'll tune in tomorrow night. And then we're back live Sunday night in Arizona from another hotel room as we get ready for this trial, which will begin Monday. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great night. I'm Nate Eaton. This is Courtroom Insider.